I know all the way from the UK. I'll just start this now. Lynne McTaggart is one of the central voices in the New Consciousness movement, an award-winning journalist, author of 7 books, including worldwide international bestsellers. You might have heard of some of these. I hope you have. Power of 8, The Field, big one, The Intention Experiment, The Bond, all considered what they call seminal books of the new science and are now translated into some 30 languages. Now, I just want to stop there before we go any more in a bio. Lynn is, I consider her the pioneer of something that today is literally bursting out. It's not just the rage, it's not just the subject. It's something that has now been started to be proven with experiments, and she started it, as far as I'm concerned. The idea of coherence group to group. She was doing experiments with large groups of people in different countries. Now we're starting to measure this. So when we talk about the field, when we talk about coherence and heart math and all the things that have happened in these last, I say, decades or so, Lynn is the one that I think of who literally was first. And so this makes us very excited to have her.
I know. And because of all of that, Lynn has got so many names that people have called her. And here are just a few, which I love. Metaphysical rock star, the Madonna of the quantum world, the Malcolm Gladwell of new science, and my favorite is the Dalai Lama. And now she's been consistently voted one of the world's top 100 spiritual leaders for groundbreaking work with consciousness and the power of intention.
Lynn is known for the quality of her writing and in-depth research, her inspirational speaking style, and her uncompromising role as new thought leader and spiritual change agent. That really puts it mildly. Lynn, I want to, and welcome to our program. I'm going to turn it over to you, and one of the first things I'm going to ask is like, wow, how did all this start with you and happen? And then I know we don't have much time, and then you can go on to some of the more current things that you're in.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Monica and Lee, for that wonderful introduction. I got hijacked into this work. That's the only thing I can really say. I am an investigative reporter by training, and it really started, my work in this area started in the mid-90s. I am also co-editor and co-founder of a magazine called What Doctors Don't Tell You. And there I was in the mid-90s, looking at medicine and what works and what doesn't work in conventional and alternative medicine. And that required looking through a lot of scientific studies. And when I was doing that, I kept coming across these really good studies of spiritual healing. And I kept thinking to myself, well, how can that be? How can you take a thought and send it to someone else and make them better? That in itself undermines everything we think about how the world works. So, journalists are curious, and I was curious about this, but I really didn't even know what I was looking for. So I convinced my publishers to let me go on a journey, a journey without a compass. And I thought, I'll find out that there is such a thing as human energy fields or something like that if I talk to all of these researchers, these pioneers in consciousness and in quantum physics. So I talked to many of them, and from one to the other to the other. Being a journalist is like pulling on a long ball of string. And as I did, I quickly realized that I'd stumbled onto a new science in the making, a completely new view of us and a new view of the world. So I kept following that, and I talked to many of these scientists. And the weird thing about quantum physicists and consciousness researchers are two things. One, they talk in kind of a code. They talk in math. And so they need to be decoded. And also, they don't like to extend beyond their own experiential work, their own experimental work. They don't want to speculate about what this all means. So I realized that was going to have to fall to me. So I was patiently tutored in quantum physics by these guys and women, and that became my book, The Field. But there was a lot of unfinished business as far as I was concerned, which was a lot of experimental evidence showing that thoughts are an actual something with the capacity to change physical matter. So the journalist in me, the skeptic in me, the doubting Thomas in me, was basically saying, yeah, what are we talking about here? Are we talking about a tiny subtle effect like moving a quantum particle, or are we talking about curing cancer with your thoughts? And it started out really as a correction, this work, the intention experiment, because there have been a lot of things written about, in the movie The Secret, and lots of things that were presenting this in a very simple way, which was wonderful to acquaint people to the whole idea about the law of attraction. But I felt there needed to be more. So I decided to set up a thing called the intention experiment. And it was a kind of a crazy whim. I thought I'll do a book, which will also be an invitation to my audiences to take part in these ongoing experiments. Because I figured, the field was in 30 languages by then. So I thought, I've got some readers out there. And I also know a lot of scientists working in consciousness research. So if I put them together, I'll have the biggest global laboratory in the world. So that's what we did. And we started off really small with seeds and leaves and, trying to shift water and make it more pure. And, I didn't think it was going to work, but it really worked. I mean, we've done everything from those kinds of experiments to lowering violence in war-torn areas, to trying to heal someone of post-traumatic stress disorder, to trying to end polarization in areas. And of our 36 experiments we've done to date, 32 have shown measurable, positive, mostly significant effects. I mean, there's no drug out there with that kind of consistent track record. So that was pretty interesting. But what was starting to shock me, particularly when we started doing these peace intention experiments, trying to lower violence, I decided to survey the participants just to see what kind of experience they had and if there were any after effects. And I was stunned to find out they were writing back extraordinary things. They were talking about making up with estranged relatives. They were saying that since the experiment, they were getting along better with their coworkers or their bosses, or they had forgiven their children. Their lives were becoming more peaceful. But the biggest result was really weird. About 40% said they were getting along better with everyone they came in contact with. They were more in love with strangers, basically. I was just bowled over by this. I didn't know what to think of it, but I kept studying it because I kept surveying people whenever we would run an experiment to see if it was as I thought, this bizarre mirror effect. So it was around, the intention experiments started around 2007. And I decided about a year later, maybe we should scale this down to a workshop. But I wasn't really sure what to do. I'm a journalist. I never put forward that I'm a healer. So I wasn't really sure what to do. So I was kicking it around with my husband one day. And I turned to him and said, I don't know. Maybe I'll just put people in groups of 8 or so and have them send healing intention to a member of the group with a health challenge. And he is also a journalist and a very good headline writer. And he said, I love it, the power of 8. And that's how we started. We had this first workshop, put people in groups of 8 or so. We didn't expect it to be anything more than a nice little feel-good effect. And lo and behold, when we had people come back the next day after this group situation, they came back and reported, all of the recipients, I have migraines every day of my life and they're clear today. I'm walking with a terrible limp. I have terrible arthritis in one knee and it's feeling normal. I'm walking normally I'm skipping down the steps. Somebody else had terrible gut problems and they were gone. Somebody else had cataracts and they were 80% better. So I'm thinking to myself, what on earth is going on here? And I also was very skeptical about it. I thought, oh, well, this is just a placebo effect. But the more I ran it, the more I found people who had never done this before, even the senders themselves, were getting healed. And I'll tell you both about an amazing thing that happened last summer, just last summer, when I think the last summer we were able to do a talk in person, which I guess is about a year and a half ago. So I was speaking in front of a group of about 700. And there I had everybody put into groups, as I always do. After I finish talking, I say, okay, let's experience this. So I put people into groups of 8 or so, had them send healing intention to a member of the group with a health challenge. And after this kind of experience, I always ask people to raise their hand and tell us if they've experienced any kind of change. So we had some amazing stories of people with terrible pain being, the pain being relieved, and people with other conditions feeling that they were better, headache gone, those kinds of things. So when I asked for one more, there were a group sitting in the front, and they were all pointing to one woman. And there she was. And she was her name is Maya, I later learned, and she was sitting in a wheelchair. She was paralyzed from the neck down. And they said, you've got to have her talk. And they wanted to try to help her to stand, because people were standing to do their talk. And she said, I don't need you. And she got up out of her wheelchair.
Oh my God.
And I know, it was amazing. And we have it on film because the whole conference was being filmed. And I was so blown away by this that I actually called her afterward and had a Zoom conversation with her to say, Maya, what was that? How did that feel? And are you still, okay? Are you still walking, et cetera? And she had this really weird idiopathic paralysis that would come and go, and had mostly come in the time before she had this intention. But she said there was something really weird that happened. She felt more love than she'd ever felt in her life from this group of strangers sending her intention. So she said it was almost too much for me. So she sent it on to a relative of hers who had cancer. And it was that moment, she said, and this was so interesting to me, that moment when she passed it on, that altruistic moment, that she felt the wheels of her wheelchair going through the floor, as she described it. And I think that was a really key piece. 2 things that she said that are really key in the work that I've done to try to understand this phenomenon. Because, the journalist in me, the skeptic in me, it keeps saying, what's going on here? Exactly why can we heal people in an instant like this? Because I've seen it now thousands of times. And I think she hit on a really key piece, which is that feeling of overwhelming love. And I think it's something even beyond that. We may feel love in our life, but number one, these are a group of strangers she's never seen before. Number 2, she's experiencing love, but she's also experiencing a state of oneness. And I think, as the work I've done and research demonstrates, we have a perception of ourselves as a separate entity in a lonely planet, in a lonely universe. That is our understanding of what it is to be human. But when you look at the new science, it's very, very different. What we see is that we're actually all connected. Now, lots of people go, yeah, we're all connected, man. But what we're talking about is actually we are connected. We are connected through our subatomic particles. We are at our most elemental, not a lot of electrical signaling and chemistry. We are subatomic particles that are pure energy. They're vibrating packets of energy. and they trade energy with other subatomic particles, like an ongoing game of tennis. And what this gives rise to is an enormous energy dense field. Now, this is so energy dense that the energy between me and you, if you were sitting about 1 yard away from me, would be enough to boil all the oceans of the world. That's how much energy is going on here, out there in empty space, like some supercharged backdrop. So what we understand is we are really all connected. And subatomic particles are a very interesting phenomenon because, number one, they go on to infinity. And they also can take on an infinite amount of information. You know, if you wanted to put the Library of Congress on a sugar cube, you could do so if they were all quantum waves. That's how big and energy dense this field is. But quantum waves go on to infinity. They can also take on information from other quantum waves or particles. They're two sides of the same coin. And that means that they have an infinite capacity to store information. So many scientists believe that this field out there, that energy dense quantum field, is like a mothership of all information. And that through this, we are all connected. Through our subatomic particles, through that endless game of tennis, we are all connected. But we don't get to experience that. But what I've seen over and over and over again is that we do get to experience this with the power of a group. That's where we see it. So what I find, and what we've studied with brainwave studies, is when people get into a small group with group intention, people leave their own individuality and they enter a state of oneness. Now, I've seen that in brainwave studies that we did. I was very lucky. Life University, the largest chiropractic university in the world, offered to put their neuroscientists at my disposal. So we gathered together some student volunteers, 7 groups of student volunteers. We put them in groups. We put an EEG cap to measure brain waves on one of each member of the group, of each group. And then afterward, we looked at them. And the neuroscientist who ran the study, Dr. Stephanie Sullivan, was amazed, as was I, because she was convinced she was going to see brainwave signatures identical to meditation. But that's not what happened. What happened was she found a global quieting of certain portions of the brain on the right side.